Welcome back. Democrats are pouncing on a comment made by the man who is widely expected to become the next Speaker of the U.S. House. Kevin McCarthy, currently the majority leader, made a comment on Fox this week that appears to confirm that the House probe of the raid on the U.S. compound in Benghazi, Libya, was part of an effort to take down Hillary Clinton. Here's McCarthy in his own words.
Everybody thought Hillary Clinton was unbeatable, right? But we put together a Benghazi special committee, a select committee. What are her numbers today? Her numbers are dropping. Why? Because she's untrustable. But no one would have known any of that had happened had we not thought and made that happen. Good.
Joining us now, Washington Post reporter Amber Phillips. She's with us from the paper's newsroom downtown. Amber, thanks very much for your time. Talk about what McCarthy said and what the reaction to it has been.
Yeah, so what he said was what you heard on Tuesday night. He said, when he was pressed by Sean Hannity to name an accomplishment with the Republican-led Congress this year, he said, well, you know, Hillary Clinton's poll numbers have gone down the more we've investigated the 2012 terrorist attacks in Libya that happened while she was Secretary of State. That was not a politically smart thing to say the least, because, as you mentioned, it gave Democrats this opening to continue this storyline that they feel Republicans' 8th investigation on this issue, they've held 8 so far, is an attack against Hillary Clinton, who's, of course, running for president. But I should add, before I go any further, last night on Fox, McCarthy clarified his comments. He said, you know what, I never meant to insinuate any of this was political. Of course, this is a committee committed to finding out the truth about what happened when those 4 Americans died. But it may have been too late. The political trouble among Democrats and Republicans had already begun for him.
House Speaker John Boehner, who will be in office both as a congressman and a speaker for another month or so, felt obliged to come out immediately and make a statement along the lines that you just described, because everyone on the Hill, I think, got the moment of peril, if you will, the political moment of peril for Congressman McCarthy pretty fast, fair to say.
Yeah, and you know, Boehner's office told me last night that they worked with McCarthy before issuing this statement. The statement didn't mention McCarthy by name, but it said, as you summarized, the committee is here for one thing, and that's to find out the truth. But in the background of Boehner's statement, you had Republicans from just about every walk of the House, from conservative champions to Tea Party Republicans like Justin Amash, going on TV and saying McCarthy should apologize, should clarify his comments. And that's troubling for a man who is widely seen as the next Speaker of the House. This was not the way he wanted to start his first week campaigning for that job.
Has it done anything to throw him off course? Is Kevin McCarthy still widely expected to be John Boehner's successor?
He is. I don't think this changes anything. I don't think it gives rise to any other Republican to take McCarthy's spot as the likely next speaker. He's, of course, the number 2. But what it does is it weakens McCarthy's bid to be speaker. When and if he does get the job, before these Benghazi comments, he was going to have a huge hurdle ahead of him in trying to unite the Republican Party. It's something that Boehner, frankly, decided he couldn't do, and he'd rather step down and end a 25-year career in Congress than you know, try to find a way to fix this problem. And so what it does is it weakens McCarthy because, A, he has Republicans going on TV and issuing statements saying, this is not what we want our leader to say. And B, he's giving Democrats fuel to their fire. And I'll add another point, C, that he's basically, you know, having trouble trying to present himself as someone who's up to all the scrutiny that a House Speaker would face.
A conservative talk show host late last week, when the news of when John Boehner announced that he would be leaving Washington, a conservative radio talk show host said, Kevin McCarthy is John Boehner with a lower IQ. Will this comment, will this controversy fuel doubts or concerns that about McCarthy along those lines?
Yeah, I think it will. Look, I think that among a certain faction of conservatives, the 30 or so of the Tea Party-linked Freedom Caucus who threatened to oust Speaker Boehner if he didn't agree to defund Planned Parenthood, I think among those members, they already don't like McCarthy. This probably solidifies it because McCarthy has become a more moderate Republican as he's risen in leadership, and he, of course, is Boehner's number 2. But I think for the rest of Republicans, the ones who might consider working with McCarthy, even though they didn't really like John Boehner, this definitely weakens any sort of relationship he has with them. I'll add, oh, go ahead.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt, but let me just throw this out there. It's a little bit of a broader comment about sort of where we are right now.
Right.
I think John Boehner chafed under the perception that if you're conservative and you believe that that legislating and serving is about getting things done, even if that means, as it often does, engaging substantively with people who have very different political philosophies than you, that is broadly criticized as being not conservative. Am I right, and is Kevin McCarthy going to inherit the same optics challenge, if you will?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think when you have a group of 30 or so Republicans, and as I mentioned, willing to try and oust their own and increase this divisiveness we've been seeing growing among the Republican Party, you certainly have a group of people who think compromise doesn't work. Boehner decided, as you pointed out, that if compromise doesn't work these days, then he's not going to be in office and he's not going to work. McCarthy inherits those same problems, and even more so, because Boehner stepped down to avoid a government shutdown essentially this week. We avoided a government shutdown, but I think conservatives who wanted Boehner out can claim victory. They forced his hand. They forced him to step down arguably before he wanted to. There's no reason they can't try that again with McCarthy. There's no reason that these emboldened bloc of Republicans can't try to put their foot down even harder on and even stronger on other issues than Planned Parenthood. And so you have these dynamics where you have a weakened potential successor facing emboldened Republicans who are intransigent on a lot of issues. It makes for a very difficult next few months.
Boehner is speaker John Boehner remains a speaker for another 4 weeks or so. He used the phrase, I want to clear the barn for my successor. So I think there's an expectation of a certain amount of legislative activity and perhaps accomplishment between now and the end of October. Is he more willing? Do we think that he's more willing going forward to get stuff done with a big block of Democratic support, and maybe not a majority of the majority, as folks on the Hill like to say, and on which issues do you expect action?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right that Boehner is sort of a free man right now. It doesn't matter if he works with Democrats or is labeled as a Republican in name only, et cetera, et cetera. And an example of how willing he is to work with Democrats is the vote to keep the government open on Wednesday night. 151 of Boehner's own caucus of Republicans voted against that short-term spending bill. That means only 91 or so Republicans voted for it, and the rest, to get to 218, were Democrats. And so I think Boehner is incredibly willing, and in fact it's going to be necessary for him to work with Democrats. The issues I see going forward, before he leaves in October, could be, the Export-Import Bank. Mm-hmm. There's a debate among some of the more conservative members of the Republican Party and the establishment about whether this bank should continue to provide loans to American businesses who want to do business abroad. We could have, another discussion on the debt ceiling, which is coming up the week after Boehner leaves, November 5th, the Treasury has said. And that's just one of several issues he's got to deal with.
An issue that we like to talk about a lot is our crumbling roads and bridges. Is a highway bill in the mix?
Yeah, a highway bill is definitely in the mix, and that's one of the issues that I've written about as could cause a potential government shutdown come December, because there are people on both sides of this issue who feel very strongly about what we should do. I think the issue is Republicans and Democrats agree that the way we fund our highways and our roads and our public transit and our bridges is broken in this highway trust fund, but no one can agree about how to fix that. No one can agree on a long-term plan.
I have to hit a break in 30 seconds or so, so let me ask this. The Hill had a story just the other day where they said some conservatives are concerned about John Boehner untethered. Is it the broad expectation that he finishes out and that nothing comes of this far right concern?
Well, I don't see John Boehner doing anything out of his priority list. But even before he announced he was going to resign, so I don't see him just sort of picking and choosing a random bunch of issues that weren't already on his plate. I see him focusing instead on things we talked about, like the Highway Trust Fund, the Export-Import Bank, issues that have to get done to keep the government running.
Amber Phillips of the Washington Post, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Back with more News Talk in a moment.